Zero Dropout Campaign is slamming government's decision to close all public schools for 4 weeks. It says this will make it difficult for vulnerable pupils to stay engaged with the curriculum. The campaign says the decision carries high social and economic costs and increases the risk of pupils dropping out. To discuss this further, we're joined by Zero Dropouts Merle Mansfield. Merle, with all of those concerns raised, you just wonder how the president could have made this decision. What was his consideration?
Absolutely. Good morning, Jane, and good morning to your viewers. And I think our concern has always been the fact that, protracted school closures definitely drive disengagement. And I think that there is an increased risk in a space like South Africa, where dropout is not prioritized, where we are not functionally tracking learners at a learner level to be able to ensure that we have, direct plans for each individual learner who is at risk of dropping out. That increases our vulnerability for dropout, and definitely thinking through this decision to close schools and also calling it a break, a break from schooling in this time when we are facing a global pandemic. Really, we should be ramping up our response, and making sure that the educational environment we're providing for our learners is going to sustain us through this period, but also after this period when, the long-term effects of this pandemic will play out.
I mean, it's offensive, isn't it, calling it a break? It's rather patronizing because it's a lot more than that. And as you were saying, I mean, dropout rates, it was an issue before the pandemic. It can only exacerbate it.
Absolutely. If we think about what actually drives disengagement, it's the kind of things that learners need to navigate, real disruptions in their lives. And, in this time of the pandemic, closing schools is definitely a disruption. And, there is also the second and third order impacts of the pandemic. It's not only health concerns. We have, hunger and food insecurity. 3 million people have already lost their jobs within this country. A report that came out recently, the NIDS CRAM study, found that 1 in 7 children were unable to access a meal within that week. And so, the real need for kind of psychosocial support and also social systems that used to be in place and, was able to help decrease the vulnerability of learners, all of those have significantly decreased. And the response to then also pull away the kind of safe space that schools provides for many of our vulnerable learners is definitely going to exacerbate the impact of learners navigating these factors within their lives.
And I should imagine a devastating impact on their mental health.
Absolutely. For many of our learners who we identify in our schools that are at high risk of dropping out, many of them are in need of psychosocial support and in need of a caring adult who, they connect with and who tracks them and works with them and counsels them. They're in group settings, and all of that access falls away. We also know that within our homes, earlier this year, we spoke a lot about the increase in gender-based violence and experiences of violence within communities and within homes, with the difficulties that families are navigating in terms of, the economic impacts as well as the health impacts. Many people are losing family members, dealing with the grief and navigating all of that impacts a learner's psychosocial well-being, mental health, and the space where we identify that often early enough to be able to engage a learner and re-engage a learner is in school.
And we know that come the end of the year, those same unions will be saying that it's not fair, that public schools are doing much better, uneven playing field. This is due to them. I mean, how do students now catch up, especially those who don't have access to social media?
Indeed. And I think, this kind of closure definitely drives inequality, not only between schools that have different access, but also within schools for learners who have different access. We know, for example, only 20% of our households have computers and only about 10% have access to internet. So if we look at that in itself, distance learning is not something that plausibly could help us enable every learner to stay engaged with school. And so we want to encourage every person at home, every family, every community. We have lots of faith-based and community-based organizations that have really stepped up in this time to engage learners and try to create safe spaces, even in streets, in churches, where learners can come and do homework, for example, or come and try and do an activity sheet, or come and read with somebody, because we know that these are important factors for learners to, have a social space, but also have a safe space, and also be reminded of school. The longer learners are away from school, the less likely it is that we'll re-engage them. And we're going to have a significant impact on our country if we have more than, the 40% we're already dealing with who's leaving school before they reach matric, dropping out as an impact of our lack of response during the pandemic.
Certainly seems that intellectual arguments are not winning at the moment. Merle Mansfield, thank you very much for that.